Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline and I create knitting content here on YouTube. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to knit a pair of gloves. So the different techniques I'm going to be showing you in this video are first just generally how to make a pair of gloves using magic loop. So what magic loop is it's basically where you use a circular needle with a longer cord for knitting in the round for like small diameters. And that way you avoid having to use double pointed needles. You can use either one to knit these gloves though, whichever you prefer. Just in the video I'll be showing you using magic loop. So we're going to start it at the bottom and we're going to cast on. Then we're going to join in the round and do our ribbing. After that we're going to begin the increases for the thumbs. That's just going to be a make one right and a make one left. Continue knitting up. Eventually we'll place our thumb stitches onto waste yarn. Continue knitting. And then I'm going to show you how to pick up and knit each one of the fingers and the little tricks I have for avoiding holes in between. Then at the end we'll go back and we'll do the thumb. So the nice thing about this pattern is that they're exactly the same for the right and the left mitten. Sorry, right and left glove. So you just knit the same one twice. And if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them down below in the comments. Down below in the description box you're going to find a few things. So first you're going to find each of the video breakpoints. So that's basically if you're only looking for a specific step, you can look down below and it'll tell you exactly what point in the video I begin talking about that. If there's a certain part you want to skip or if there's a certain part you want to watch again, all those times are down below. You're also going to find all the materials I use to make my gloves, and you're also going to find the full written version of the pattern, so that way you can print it out and follow along. Thanks for watching. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe, and I hope you enjoy. Starting off with my yarn, I'm using a merino cashmere nylon fingering weight yarn. And so this one in particular comes with 400 meters and 100 grams, which is, and then it is 80% superwash merino, 10% cashmere, and 10% nylon. And in total, to make both of the mittens, I'm going to end up using about 200 meters, or the equivalent of that is about 220 yards. I also need 2 pieces of scrap yarn. So this is also fingering weight yarn. I have one piece that's a little bit longer. This one's about 2 feet long. And then another one that's a little bit shorter. It's about 1 foot long. And you just want to pick out some scrap yarn that's a little bit of a different color than the actual yarn you're using, just to make it easier to pick up the stitches. I have 1 tapestry needle, 1 stitch marker. I've also found a ruler to be really helpful in this project, just because in the pattern I'll say knit for 4 inches, so it's just helpful to have a little ruler to measure as you go along. And then for my knitting needle, I do prefer knitting using magic loop rather than double pointed needles. So I have a long cord here. This is a size US 2, and it's about a 24-inch cord. But if you do prefer to not use magic loop and to use double pointed needles, you can definitely do that as well. And again, it's the size US 2. Starting off with the cast on down at the bottom, you want to use a stretchier cast on method here. So I would recommend using the long tail cast on or a method similar to that. The one in particular I'm going to use is called the German twisted cast on. And I do have a video link down below where I just show that specific cast on method. And I'm going to cast on a total of 56 stitches. I just finished casting on those 56 stitches, and when I was finished I just took my tail and just tied it up so it doesn't get in the way. So now I'm going to divide for magic loop. I also want to point out too, I just knitted something with this yarn and then I ripped it out, so that's why the yarn looks like this. The whole thing doesn't look like that. So I'm going to slide. To divide for magic loop, I'm going to slide all these stitches over to my cord, and then I just count in from the center and find the midway point. Now that I'm at that midway point, I'm just going to pull the cord through, so that basically both sets of the half stitches end up on a knitting needle. And now if I'm just holding these flat, like parallel to the table, I want the one furthest away from me to have the working yarn coming out of it. And let me just zoom in. You also want to make sure that you have all the bumps down. And then you just want to check in this inner corner too to make sure it isn't twisted. So I have all those cast on, the whole cast on edge is facing down. The working yarn is coming out that back needle. And I'm gonna set it up. My first stitch on this side is gonna be knit stitch. So I have my working yarn coming out in between the needles and then up over that back needle. Now the first row is just to begin the ribbing. So I'm gonna pull through my back needle or pull to the right, and then just take that needle point and go into that first stitch on the front needle. Now I'm gonna knit 2 and purl 2 all the way across my front needle. Now that I've finished going across that front needle, I'm gonna re-thread in my second needle. So basically the stitches are each on a needle. And now again, I want to turn my needle points towards the right. So now when I set it up, each time I'm going across the side, I want to make sure my needle points are pointed towards the right and my working yarn's coming out the back needle. So I just finished on this side with a purl 2. So again, I'm going to start on my front needle with a knit 2. So I want my yarn to come out in between the needles and then up over the back needle. I'm going to pull towards the right, that back needle, and just begin knitting 2 and then purl 2 across the remainder of this row. And once I go across this side, I've completed 1 full round because you need to go across each half and then that makes up 1 round. Now I'm going to continue working round after round of this knit 2 purl 2 ribbing until this portion measures 2 inches. So I'm going to measure from the bottom of the cast on edge up until the bottom of the knitting needle. So I'll come back and show you what that looks like once I get there. Now that I've finished those 2 inches of knitting, I'm just going to knit 3 full rounds. Now I'm all ready to begin my thumb increases. So I do have my 1 stitch marker ready. I won't need it for a couple of rounds though. And the first stitch on this first increase round says make 1 right. So to do a make 1 right using magic loop, basically you have to pick up this bar in between the stitch that you just worked and the one you're about to work. So in this case, because we're right on the edge, it's going to be in between this back needle and the front needle. So it's this top bar here. And you want to pick it up with your left needle point going from back to front. So that can be a little tricky because basically there's 2 ways you can do it. You can either slide your stitches up towards the top of this left needle and then kind of stretch out your work and pick up the bar, but that can be a little bit tight. So what I recommend doing is just taking your right needle point, just picking up that bar, and you just go right from front to back underneath it. And now you want to take your left needle point and again just go back to front underneath that bar. And now knit into the front of that loop. So that's my first increase stitch. Now I'm just going to knit for the rest of this round. And then after that, I'm going to knit 1 full round. So it's basically like I do 1 increase round and then knit 1 full round. Now at the beginning of this next increase round, I'm again going to do a make 1 right. So I'm just going to pick up the bar with my right needle point and then take my left needle point from back to front, knit into the front of it. Now I'm going to knit 1 and then I'm going to place my stitch marker. Now I'm just going to knit all the way across the remainder of this round and then knit 1 additional round after that. So again, it'll be this increase round and then 1 knit round. Now that I have my stitch marker on my work, it basically divides this front needle to where I'll have just the thumb stitches over here on the right hand side of the stitch marker, and then just the regular rest of the portion of the mitten over here on the left side of the stitch marker. And now I can show you the increase row that we're going to repeat over and over again until we reach the right number of stitches for the thumb. So to start off, it's again going to be a make 1 right. Then I'm going to knit over until the stitch marker. And now I'm going to do a make one left. So for a make one left, you pick up the bar in between the stitch you just worked and the one you're about to work from front to back. So again, you can either just use the left needle point, or you can pick it up with the right needle point and then go front to back. And I'm going to knit into the back of that loop. So now I've just increased 2 stitches. I'm going to slip my stitch marker and I'm going to knit the rest of the round. And once I finish this increase round, I'm going to knit 2 full rounds before I do another increase round. So again, my increase round is do a make one right, knit until I reach the stitch marker, do a make one left, pass the stitch marker, and then knit the rest of the round. Then I'm going to knit 2 full rounds before doing my next increase round. And I'm going to continue repeating those 3 rows over and over again until I have a total of 20 stitches before this stitch marker. I now have 20 stitches before my stitch marker, and I just finished after I knit those final 2 rounds. So now what I'm going to be using is my smaller piece of waste yarn and my tapestry needle. So I'm just going to thread it onto my tapestry needle. And now I want to slide these first 20 stitches on this front needle, so all the stitches up until my stitch marker, onto the waste yarn. Now I'm also going to slide off my stitch marker because I don't need that anymore. And I found it's easier once I have these thumb stitches off to the side to just tie a little bow to keep them secure. And then I'm going to tuck this waste yarn into the mitten. Now I'm just going to reset my needles so I'm ready to be in magic loop again. And now I'm just going to continue knitting right into that new first stitch on the front needle. And I'm going to continue knitting round after round until this knit portion, so basically from where the ribbing ends up until the bottom of my knitting needle, measures 4 inches. I'm now all ready to begin the fingers. So what I'll need for this step is I'll need my longer piece of waste yarn and then also my tapestry needle. I'm just going to start off by doing some rearranging of my stitches. So I'm just going to take my needle and I'm just going to slide purlwise my first 8 stitches. Now I'm going to take my tapestry needle with my waste yarn and I'm going to slide the rest of those front stitches onto my waste yarn. Now I'm going to turn my work, rethread in my needle, and now I want to slide all of these stitches up until my last 8 stitches onto waste yarn as well. Now just so I can get back over to the front of my round or the beginning of my round, I'm just going to take my needle and then slide these last 8 stitches purlwise as well. So now when I turn my work, I'll be back at the beginning of my round, and the way I'm set up now is I have 8 stitches on my front needle, 8 stitches on my back needle, and the rest of my stitches are held on my waste yarn. So to begin this first finger, I'm going to knit across the front 8 stitches. Now I'm going to cast on 2 stitches. So the way I cast on stitches in the middle of a round is I basically just take my tail and I put my hand right behind it, grab it with my bottom 3 fingers, and now I'm going to take my pointer finger towards myself and underneath the strand, then up over towards the back of the strand, and then back behind. So it's basically like I've created 1 full loop around my finger. And now I'm going to take the knitting needle underneath that strand and slide it on. That's my first stitch cast on. So to show it one more time, I just put my hand behind the yarn, grab it with my bottom 3 fingers. Now I'm going to take my pointer finger, go underneath the strand, back behind as I go up above. Now I've cast on 2 stitches. Now I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to continue knitting all the way across these back 8 stitches. Now that I finished that first round, I have a total of 10 stitches on my front needle and 8 stitches on my back needle. And now I'm going to continue working round after round until this finger measures 2.5 inches from where I've cast on those 2 stitches. Or if you're also making these for yourself, you can slide them over to the cord and try on the gloves as you go along. So you just want to make sure that when you try it on, you're pushing these cast on stitches all the way down towards the bottom. And then you're just going to want to stop a little bit shorter than the top of your finger so we have enough room for the decreases. So again, I'm going to continue going for about 2.5 inches. Now I'm going to do my first decrease round. So the decrease round is going to be knit 2 together, then knit 2, and repeat that all the way across the round. So again, it's knit 2 together, knit 2. I'm going to finish with those final 2 stitches and just do a knit 2 together. I now have 13 stitches on my knitting needles, and I'm just going to knit 1 full round. And now on this final round, I'm just going to do knit 2 together all the way across the round. If you ever end up with just the 1 stitch on the front side, just pull the knitting needle all the way through and then it goes back over to the other side. So that way you can do a knit 2 together. With that final stitch, I'm just going to knit it. So now I need to break my yarn, leaving a little bit of a tail. So I'm probably going to leave about 8 inches. Going to thread my tail onto my tapestry needle. And now I'm going to thread the tapestry needle through the remaining stitches. I always like to start on the next stitch I would be working. So basically this is the last stitch I did work. So this one on the front needle is the one I would be about to start. So I'm just going to pull that tight to close it up. And for now, I'm just going to leave that there. At the end, I'll come back and weave in all these ends. For the middle finger, I'm again going to start with my glove, facing basically with the thumb towards the right-hand side. And I want to go along this waste yarn and pick up the first 7 stitches. Once I have those, I'm going to pull the waste yarn out of them. Now I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to pull my needle so that those front stitches end up basically on the opposite needle. And on this side, I want to count in 7 stitches from the edge. And I want to start basically further away from where they end, so over towards the right-hand side, picking up those 7 stitches. Once I have those 7, I'm going to pull my waste yarn out. And now I'm going to turn it back so the front of my work is facing me, or basically so the thumb is over on the right-hand side. Now I've just retucked all my waste yarn back into the mitten to keep it out of the way. And now I'm ready to begin knitting across those front 7 stitches. So I'm just going to reattach my yarn, and I just leave about a 10-inch tail and then just begin knitting right away. Once I finish knitting across those 7 stitches, I'm going to again cast on 2 stitches at the end of the row. Now I'm going to turn my work. And now I'm going to begin knitting across those back 7 stitches. So now before I turn my work and begin knitting round after round, I'm actually going to want to pick up 2 stitches from this other finger. So if you remember, over here is where we cast on those 2 stitches. So we're going to want to pick up those 2 stitches now. So what I look for, let me just zoom in a little bit. On this inner edge, you want to look for the bottommost loops of where you cast on. So for me, it's a little tricky to see with the fingering weight yarn, but it's going to be this green loop, and then right next to it there's the blue loop. So those are the 2 I want to pick up. And what I found is helpful is to prevent holes. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to pick up this green one, and I'm going to pick up one of these stitches, half of the stitches over here. So I'm basically going to pick up the green one and this blue one that the yarn's currently going through. And I want to knit those 2 together, and then I'm going to pick up this second cast on stitch, and I'm going to pick up the equivalent stitch on the other side, and I'm going to knit those 2 stitches together. So this will help prevent holes. So the way I pick them up is I actually want to pick up this green one from underneath, going up towards basically the finger. And now I want to pick up half of that blue stitch on the side, again going behind it and towards the front. Now I want to knit those 2 together through the back loop. Now I'm going to pick up the second cast on stitch that I had, just that blue one. I'm going to pick this one up though, going basically from like top to bottom or in towards the opening of the mitten, and then pick up half of that blue stitch. And now these 2 I just knit normally, knit 2 together. And now I've picked up those 2 stitches on the side that I need. Now I'm going to turn my work, and now I have 9 stitches on my front needle and 9 stitches on my back needle. So I'm ready to begin just working round after round and working this finger. So this finger I'm going to continue knitting until it measures 3 inches from the cast on stitches over here on the side up to the top. And then I'm going to cast it off the same way as I did for this first finger. For this next finger, I'm again going to pick up the same number of stitches as this previous finger. So I'm going to pick up 7 on the front and 7 on the back. And then again, I'm going to cast on 2 on this outside edge. And then I'm going to pick up 2 on this center edge. And I'm going to work it exactly the same way as the previous finger, but I'm actually just going to make it a little bit shorter. So I'm going to make this third finger the exact same length as my pointer finger. Now for this pinky finger, I only have 6 stitches left on each side. So I'm just going to go around, pick up the first 6 stitches on my first needle, then go across, pick up the second set of 6 stitches. Now I can also take my waste yarn all the way out. So now here, I'm just going to knit across the front 6 stitches, turn my work, knit across the back 6 stitches, and then pick up the 2 stitches from the side of the last finger. So just on this one, on the outside edge, you don't need to cast on those extra 2 stitches. So it'll just be 6 on the front needle, and then you'll end up with 8 on this back needle. And I'm going to continue working those stitches until my work measures basically right around 1 3/4 inches from the bottom. And then I'm going to cast off in the same fashion as my previous fingers. So the last thing I have here is the thumb. And so to pick up these waste yarn stitches, I'm actually just going to turn my mitten over. So now the thumb is on the left-hand side. And I'm going to start at the inner corner and go across and pick up the first 10 stitches. Now I'm going to pull on my knitting needle towards the left so that all my stitches are now on the second knitting needle. I'm going to turn my work, and now I'm going to use my free knitting needle point to pick up the rest of the 10. I can just pull out my waste yarn, and I want to turn my work again so my knitting needle points are pointed towards the right. So I kind of just have my glove hanging out down below, fingers are over towards the right, and then the wrist part's over towards the left. I'm going to get my yarn ready to rejoin it. To start out, I'm going to knit those 10 stitches across my front needle. Now I want to turn my work. And on this side, I'm again going to knit across the 10 stitches over here, but before I turn my work and complete that round, I'm actually going to pick up 1 stitch at this inner edge. So now at this inner edge, I want to pick up one of these stitches to kind of close up the gap that'll form in this little corner. So the way I do that is I'm actually going to pick up 2 bars. I'm going to pick up one from the far side and one from the closer side to me. And then I'm just going to knit those 2 together. So that'll help prevent a large hole from forming there. And if there is anything that does form, you can always use this extra tail that you have to tighten it up more. I'll show you that at the end. Now I'm going to turn my work. And after going across that first round, right now I have 10 stitches on my front needle and 11 stitches on my back needle. So when I go across this round now, I'm going to knit all 10 stitches on my front needle. And then on my back needle, I'm going to knit 9, and then I'm going to knit 2 together. And now when I turn my work again, I have 10 stitches on each needle. So now I'm going to continue knitting for this thumb until it measures 1.5 inches from this bottom edge down here where we picked up a stitch. And once I've completed that, I'm going to cast off the same way I did for the rest of the fingers, where you do the decrease round where it's knit 2 together, knit 2 all the way around, then knit 1 round, and then knit 2 together all the way across the round. And of course the full written pattern is down below. Here's my finished glove before I've woven in any of the ends. So to start out, I'm going to start by weaving in these top ends. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn the glove inside out, and then I'm going to thread each one of these ends into the other side, or kind of like inside the glove, and show you how I'm going to bind those off. So now I have my glove inside out, and I've taken one of each of these ends, they're at the ends of the finger, and threaded them basically now so they're on the same side as the inside of my work. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to tie a knot at the top of each one of these fingers. So this one's going to be a little trickier to see because it's such a dark color, but I just want to pick a loop close to where I've threaded the tail through, and I'm going to tie a double knot to make sure this closure is nice and sturdy. And now I'm just gonna weave in my end as I normally would. So now I'm gonna repeat tying a knot and weaving in my end on each one of the tops of the fingers, including the thumb. And then once I've done that, I'm gonna cut my yarn on each of those. I've now finished weaving in each of those ends, so now I'm gonna move down to these ones. And as I weave these in, I'm gonna close up any gaps that remain in between the fingers. And the easiest way I found to do this is I'm just gonna reverse my glove real quick so the right side is out. And now I'm gonna thread each one of those ends to the outside of the glove. Okay, so the thing I would recommend doing most when you're weaving in each one of these is to try on the mitten and see if you have any gaps that are remaining. So for example, if I stretch this out in between my pinky finger and my ring finger, I can see that there's a little bit of an opening right in there. It's a little difficult to see because it's such dark yarn. So when I weave in my end, I'm gonna reinforce that by weaving back and forth and kind of following the stitches that remain in between the fingers. And none of my gaps are really that large at all. This one I don't actually really notice a gap in. There might be a little bit. And then for the thumb, I'm probably just gonna go through and reinforce the few stitches in here just to make them a little stronger. But I think for the most part, the trick I have of picking up 2 on each side when I add in those stitches helps to reduce the holes that form. Here are my finished gloves. Again, the right and the left glove are exactly the same, so you're just gonna wanna follow the pattern steps twice and you'll end up with a set. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them down below. And if you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.